I lost everything, absolutely everything. Even though the previous time I'd lost everything, this time I really lost everything. I was okay until I was about 7, and then my dad died. And I didn't cry, which is I was born of an era when boys don't cry, and I probably dealt with that trauma very badly. I think in my early years I suffered a lot of abandonment issues. My dad died, then one of my granddads died, and I think by the age of 21 I'd lost 5 or 6 relatives. When my dad died, my mum became a bit of a workaholic, and she just worked all the time, so she was never there. So I think I did the shoplifting as a way to get attention, and then it went from there onwards. When I found my first magazine, it was accepted in those days, top shelf magazines, all that. But for an addict, it's not just that, it just goes bananas, and I would fantasize over everything, absolutely everything. Male, female, dog, cat, whatever. It would just snowball. It started off with what I would call softcore magazines, and it just snowballed into more and more explicit. I can remember when I went on my first holiday on my own when I was 18, the thing I was looking for was the really explicit magazines that you couldn't get in Britain. And I would send off for magazines. The harder the core, the better. And that's part of the addiction. It's not just the actual act, it's the actual build up to the act. And then after the act, you feel so shit about yourself that you go into a terrible guilt, terrible shame, which then makes you feel like you want to act out again. So, and that's the continuous circle.
What do you think the lowest point you got to was?
I had 2 low points. The first one, I got arrested for looking at underage stuff and other illegal stuff that they don't tell you is illegal until you get caught for it. And I just got a caution, 3 years on the sex offenders registry, and that was it. And then in 2014, I had my second knock at the door, and this time my whole world just collapsed. Why it happened this way, I don't know. I really don't know, but it was good for me. My whole world collapsed. I was put under crisis. Because I'd already tried to commit suicide when I was arrested. I took loads of pills and loads of alcohol, and the next day I woke up, no effect whatsoever. I was peed off, because that's the thing with this addiction, it drives you. It's not just this addiction, all addictions drive you to such despair that you want to commit suicide. I went into crisis, I was put under crisis, I was put under a PCMHT. My wife had to remove anything from the room that I could even think about. I mean, all the electrical equipment was taken out of the room. She had to hide all the knives in the kitchen. Not that I didn't leave the room for a week. I just couldn't, when I was not sleeping, I was in that kind of, I couldn't really sleep. Because whenever I dreamt about committing suicide. My daughter came home, she had been away, and she came home and she saw how I was talking, and at the time I didn't see it, but she said I was manipulating the situation. I didn't see it at the time. I've seen it since. And I know the police for years tried to attack the actual websites, which didn't work, because as soon as they'd knock one down, another one would come up. So I think now they target the people that look at it, because if there's less demand, then there won't be any use for those sites. I can understand why they go for the person who looks at the stuff, but they're very, very. Most police forces. I mean, I've only dealt with two different counties, so I can only say from my experience they have been so supportive. The main problem is why do you look at it? That's the main problem for me. I was escaping from the trauma. I was escaping from my depression. I was just trying to cover it all up. I mean, I was diagnosed with depression when I was 30 and I was put on tablets. But what would happen is I would get myself to a level place and think, oh, I'm better now, and take myself off them. I didn't get married till I was 30, but my wife was abusive. Again, my way of dealing with it was to go deeper into my addiction, which isn't the right way. I understand that. It's not the right way of dealing with it, but it was the only way I could. Because it wasn't just a physical abuse, it was psychological as well. And I didn't have anyone to talk to. And I think the thing I've got out of the 12-step program is being able to talk. She was suffering from postnatal depression, and the violence came out of that, but then it carried on, and it wasn't postnatal depression, it was something else. And I did retaliate once. I pulled her finger, and I felt so ashamed. I felt really bad about it. You don't deal with it. That's the problem, you don't deal with it. There's not. I think if a woman's abused, you have lots of outlets. If a man's abused, one, he's seen as weak. Two, it's really hard for a guy to talk about it because it's such a taboo subject. I never got an apology. Or if I did get an apology, it was like, well, you knew what you said was going to wind me up, it's your fault. And it's after a while you start to believe that. You believe that you're unworthy. You believe you're not a good person. You never know how people are going to react to, because it's such a taboo subject, and it's such, everyone sees it as, oh, you're this sick individual, and they label you with a name that should go unnamed. The police don't see you like that. The police see you as an internet sex offender. End of. Social services and other people see you as something else, and a risk to every child ever born or ever. But it's not about that. It's a fantasy world on the internet. I know it isn't, but when you're in it, it's fantasy. You have power. But I would never do that to a real child. I'm not recovered. I'll never be recovered. That's why I always say I'm a recovering addict. I will never be recovered because it'll always be there in the background. The thing is, what happened yesterday is irrelevant, and what happens tomorrow is irrelevant until I get there. But this day is all I have, and I could slip tomorrow. I mean, my side of sex addiction was poor, but some people it's not. It's affairs outside their marriage, it's visiting prostitutes, visiting escorts. There's so many diverse aspects of sex addiction. If it hadn't been for the 12 steps, I would be in one of two places now, in jail or dead. I heard of one addict who took his life November last year, and one that took his life about 3 years ago, because it's such a taboo subject that people can't live with it, and the shame and the guilt is so heavy that you just give up. A lot of the public don't understand that, yes, I was looking at underage children, but I'm not attracted to them. It's just the way the addiction took me. I was trying for the next hit. There are those in society that are attracted to younger people, which again needs to be addressed, but that wasn't my problem. My problem was the porn addiction, and where it led me.